George Cox for Talk of the Town for a very special edition on scams and frauds and how you can protect you and your family. We are here with Greg J. White from the Office of Consumer Affairs and Business Regulation. So welcome to the ActonTV, and we're going to talk about scams and frauds. So give us an overview of what you do.
Thanks, George. I appreciate you having me on the show. You know, many times when people hear of consumer affairs, right away they think of the Attorney General's office. We are a separate state agency. Consumer protection is a big part of what the Attorney General does. They have a Consumer Protection Bureau, but we're an independent state agency. We're under the Baker-Polito administration. Under Secretary Chapman oversees the Office of Consumer Affairs and Business Regulation. And we have a fairly broad mandate, and I just want to give you a quick overview of what we do and what we're about. We oversee 5 regulatory agencies. The Undersecretary likes to say, if you go down Main Street America, we regulate pretty much everyone. So we oversee the Division of Insurance, which regulates healthcare, auto insurance, property insurance. They oversee the Surcharge Appeals Board, which, by the way, is the only one in the country. Most states, if you have an accident and your surcharge, it's the insurance company that determines whether or not that surcharge is going to apply. Here we have an independent board. We have the Division of Banks, which regulates over 200 state-chartered credit unions and banks with combined assets of $400 billion. They oversee debt collectors as well. We oversee the Department of Telecommunications and Cable, which regulates the telecommunications and cable industry. We oversee the Division of Standards, which we'll talk more about it when we talk about scams. They're responsible for licensing gas stations and fuel pumps. They go and inspect the fuel pumps. If you go and pump your gas, you'll see a seal on there. That's been put on either by a local inspector or by one of the state inspectors to determine that what is being advertised is in fact going into your gas tank. They inspect fuel delivery trucks as well as price scanners. We oversee the Division of Professional Licensure, which recently consolidated with the Department of Public Safety. They license over 525,000 licensees in Massachusetts, from chiropractors to veterinarians to accountants, electricians, plumbers. They oversee amusement parks. They oversee ticket resellers like Stub, Ace, so they have a pretty broad mandate as well. In addition to that, we have our own individual mandate. We oversee the do not call list along with the federal government. We oversee the data breach. So if you're an entity and you carry personal or hold personal information of Massachusetts residents, and this goes hand in hand with what we'll talk about in a moment in terms of scams, if that information has been compromised, they're required to notify our office as well as the Attorney General's office, the nature of the breach, how many Massachusetts residents have been impacted, and what they're doing to rectify it. Last year, there were over 2,000 breaches involving over 200,000 Massachusetts residents. We oversee the lemon law arbitration program. So if you've been aggrieved by purchasing a new or pre-owned vehicle, you can apply for arbitration through our office. We oversee the most important program is the home improvement contracting program. And speaking of scams, there are individuals out there who are masquerading as contractors, taking your money and then never performing any work. In Massachusetts, if you're doing home improvement contracting work, you're required to register with our office. We maintain a list of contractors who are properly registered, and there are over 27,000 in Massachusetts. And I like to say that for the most part, those folks out there who are doing home improvement contracting are legitimate. They're doing good work, but like anything, you have bad apples in any entity. So you should, before you hire a contractor, and today, you know, George, for the most part, your home is your biggest asset. You can't get even minimal work done without spending thousands of dollars. So make sure that the individual is properly registered. And the reason being is not only can you ensure that through our office that they haven't had any complaints against them, but more importantly, if you've been aggrieved by the contract at some point, provided you meet the criteria, you can recoup up to $10,000 through our guaranteed fund. But it has to be a registered contract. It has to be a written contract. And there's certain criterias, and you should contact our office and they can tell you what should be in the contract. We, again, maintain a list. If they're not properly registered, then you shouldn't be hiring them. The other thing we're doing is we're working with town building inspectors, and they're our front line of defense. We've asked them that before they issue any permit, that they ensure that the contractor is properly registered, that they have their HIC and what they call their CSL, which is Construction Supervisory License. And we've had a great response in terms of that. We've had contractors who've come in and said, you know, I tried to pull a permit and they wouldn't let me. The other thing we advise consumers is if you're paying a general contractor thousands of dollars to do the work and that individual is asking you to pull the permit, that should raise a red flag. You know, they should be out there going to the town building inspector and pulling the permit. So that's one of our most important programs. In addition to that, we oversee a toll-free hotline. It's manned by 4 students from Northeastern, and they take hundreds of calls a day. They're not lawyers, they're not there to give legal advice, but what they are there to do is to direct you to the appropriate agency and answer basic consumer-related questions. One, the types of calls they receive, and again, there are hundreds that they receive on a daily basis, but many involve scams and identity theft, which is a big focus of our office these days. We just held a cybersecurity conference at the Federal Reserve in Boston last fall. We invited financial institutions throughout Massachusetts to come in. We had guest speakers from the FBI, from the private sector, to talk about how to identify identity theft and how best to protect yourself. And that's one of the biggest things that impacts consumers, is that they have their passwords stolen. They've been hacked into their computer and they get their personal information. Speaking about scams, one of the biggest scams out there is ransomware, where they will infiltrate your computer. And we've not only had this happen to consumers, but it's been police departments, it's been hospitals, it's been businesses. And what they'll do is basically they'll put malware on a website. You go in and it infects your system. Then they contact you and they say, listen, in order to unfreeze your computer, you need to pay a ransom.
And I do believe that happened to a big, it happens all over, but it happened to a huge hospital recently.
It did.
And they have to pay in bitcoins, which is very hard to track.
Exactly.
I don't know if people know what bitcoins are. It's a form of like online payment.
Exactly. And what they'll do is they'll basically freeze your information. I was recently talking to a former colleague of mine. I began my career as a prosecutor in Massachusetts, and I worked with him. He's a chief of police. He told me that their department's been hit 3 times. And he's brought in a private consultant to come in, and they basically said, you know, it's going to cost you thousands of dollars and we can't guarantee it.
You know, we're talking about the Bitcoin,
Yeah.
holding the computer ransoms right now, and you know, like, is there anything people can do to protect themselves?
Again, be careful what websites you go on. That's the first line. But as soon as we identify a way to address an issue, they come up with another way. And one of the things, again, that we talked about before the show is skimming devices. Our Division of Standards, which goes out and inspects fuel pumps, are finding them all across the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Basically what they'll do is they'll go in the dead of night and they will place these skimming devices in the fuel pump.
Yeah, they attach them to ATMs,
They attach them to
gas
ATM,
pumps,
price scanners.
Yeah.
They'll blacken out the camera. They'll put in a dummy tape. They'll go in and they'll put these skimming devices. And this is the newest one. It's a 2-prong. Basically what it does is one captures your credit card information. The second one captures your keystrokes. So you asked me before the show, by using credit versus debit, does that, well, it will with this device, because you won't be putting your PIN number with a credit.
And that's what I heard. I mean, I heard that on the news, that if you are going to go to the gas station or an ATM, or you make your purchases at the pump after hours, which a lot of people do,
yes,
it's better to hit the credit versus using your debit, where you're putting in your PIN code ring it in as credit.
Right, but if there's a skimming device, it's still capturing your credit card information.
Right.
You know, and we advise consumers that you know, when they go to the gas pump, that they look for the state seal or the local seal. If that's been breached, notify the proprietor. Again, once we identify a way to address it, now they've come up with counterfeit stickers.
Now they're having a fake seal, so it looks legitimate as you're going to the pump,
Right.
but it really isn't.
Right, but again, look to see if the seal's been breached and then notify the proprietor. They're on ATM machines. What they'll do is they'll put a piece over the credit card slot, and that will capture your credit card, and then they will mount cameras on the side or above the ATM machine, which will capture your PIN number. And George, recently we had there was a correction officer who was attending a concert in Providence, and he went to the ATM to withdraw some money, noticed that the facade was slightly ajar, pulled it back, and there was a skimming device.
Wow.
Now, we don't recommend that. There's important forensic evidence in there. Notify the bank, they'll notify the FBI and the local police department, and they'll address it. But this is a group that's operating, many of them halfway around the world in Eastern Europe. With the cybersecurity conference, the FBI agent talked about a recent case where they had put these skimming devices in mom and pop stores in upstate New York, high travel area. They put them in and and now they've gotten sophisticated. They utilize Bluetooth. Back in the day when they found these skimming devices, they would set up surveillance, they'd wait to come back to retrieve it. Now they leave the skimming device in. It's the cost of doing business. In this one mom and pop store, they had put these skimming devices in. They had taken the information, they had sent it out to 30 countries worldwide with a caveat, don't release it until a certain date and time, at which point they gave a green light, and within hours, millions of dollars had been lost. And
Millions?
Millions.
Wow.
You know, and that was just one small mom and pop store. So unfortunately, they're out there. They're handheld skimming devices. Again, we talked about it before the show. They'll rub up against you in a mall.
Now that's scary. You'll be shopping in a mall, and then someone just bumps into you, and they just swiped all your credit card information.
So
you know?
we have these security sleeves. You put your credit card in there, and they can't access.
Now, do they make special wallets too?
They do. They make wallets.
What are those called? It's like
they have different terms for it. But again, I was on a show recently, and this woman it looked like a plastic container with slots for individual credit cards, and it was very thin, but it was enough to protect it. They also, since 2007, they put a chip in your passport with all your personal information.
So this is good to have, too.
They'll rub up against it, and they'll capture all your personal information.
You know you're not getting these back today.
Well,
you know
those are gifts from you, George, anyways.
'Cause I think those come in handy.
Exactly. So skimming devices are one of our biggest issues that we're dealing with in terms of identity theft and helping to make consumers aware. But in addition to that, they're the scams out there that they are so numerous. And
let's talk about a few of those scams. You know, an acquaintance of mine was his parents were victims of the grandparents scam.
Yes.
And this really happened. Tell us, people at home, what the grandparents scam is.
What they'll do, they call it the grandparent scam, they call it the grandmother scam. They'll go on social media and they will find out, for instance, that your friend's parents had a grandson studying abroad or locally. And they'll say, well, how was one able to obtain their name and their school and their friends? Social media. Facebook. I mean, you can find, if you're doing the right research, you can pretty much find out everything about anyone.
And you know, the thing is, we all love our Facebook, but sometimes, you know, it's not always good to post everything that you do, like you're going out of town.
Exactly.
Or, you know, we all love it, but there's some drawbacks to the social world that we live in. It's a different world now.
Absolutely. I mean, our world has expanded, and again,
the information is easier to get now.
It's very, I mean, back in the day when I was a young prosecutor, identity theft consisted of someone losing their wallet and then obtaining the information. Now the people don't have to leave their home, they're halfway around the world. And there are these scammers out there who are taking advantage, predominantly the elderly who are victims of these scams, one of which is why they call it the grandparent
So
scam.
tell people at home exactly what these people do.
Basically what they do is they obtain information, they find out someone's grandchild is studying abroad. They will contact that individual in the dead of night. Two ways: they'll either pretend to be the authorities, or they'll put a young person on. It's late at night, maybe the grandparent can't hear as well, and this individual will be pretending to be the grandson, saying, "I've been arrested, I've been detained, I need you to get post my bond." Now, the red flag should be, they're not asking you, they do occasionally ask for you to wire the money. But in addition to that, they'll say, could you go to Walmart and get gift cards? Now, I don't know what police department or what governmental authority is using gift cards to pay bonds, but you know, given the fact I was a prosecutor for 14 years, I think I'm safe to say there's none. You know, that should be the first telltale sign if they want you to go to Walmart. Yet they will also ask for you to wire money, which is more legitimate. Again, I was talking to you earlier, and there was an individual in our office whose mother-in-law lived in Texas, had a grandchild who was studying in Atlanta, got a call in the middle of the night. This individual purported to be the authority and saying, your grandson has been detained, you need to wire $2,500. So she went out first thing in the morning, went to her bank, went to Western Union. The guy behind the counter said, ma'am, I'd like to take your money, but it's a scam. It's not legitimate. I'm not going to. And she thanked him and went out to a less reputable place. They took her money, and she was out $2,500. Same thing with I think the individual that you were talking about. They couldn't get it back. This entity was operating in another country. Local law enforcement get calls and people coming in regularly on this, and their hands are tied.
So it almost seems like once you do the transfer, the people who are perpetrating these crimes are getting away with it.
Absolutely.
Because you're not getting your money back.
Absolutely. But in addition to that, there are many other scams. The IRS scam, it's been around for years, but there's a group operating out of the state of Washington and upstate New York who have been harassing consumers in Massachusetts for the past 2 years. They'll call, they'll say, they're calling from the IRS. You've been identified as a subject of a criminal prosecution. In order to avoid that, you need to wire money to such and such. First off, the IRS doesn't operate like that. You know, when in doubt, hang up and call Andover. Now, I had said in the past that the IRS never reaches out by phone, but I was recently informed that they are starting to do that, but they're never going to ask you to wire money to avoid.
So you just hang up, and then you call the IRS office in Andover.
Sure.
And then you ask, did you recently inquire and call me, and they'll know.
In fact, George, there was a thing, someone had posted on YouTube. It was a police department somewhere in the country, and they had a camera on the dispatcher. He's in uniform.
I saw that
Did you see
video.
that?
Yeah, there's a viral video, which I think I'll post it as we're showing the show, where they called a police officer, and he went along with it for a while.
He said, "Who's gonna?" They said, "We'll call the local police department," and he's looking around at himself.
Yes, yeah, I saw the video. We're gonna post that. We'll show a clip of that right now.
Right. So.
Hello, is this the IRS?
That's correct.
It said to call this number if it just said that I had committed a fraud or something.
All right, sir. So, do you have a case number with you?
No, it didn't give me a case number. It just said that I was going to be arrested and I should call this number back.
You know, we have to go some kind of verification process, and the guideline says that you have to verify your name and your mailing address. And if you provide us your valid name and valid address, we will be able to help you further with your case file.
But you said you were going to issue a warrant for me and come to my house. If you don't have my address, how are you going to do that? So, like, how long do I have, to get this taken care of before I would get arrested?
You have today, whole day, sir.
Is that like 24 hours, so tomorrow at this time, or is it until midnight tonight?
Till not midnight, till till our shift is over, till what can I say? Till our working hours is over.
So, but again, this has been around for years, and people are still being victimized by it. We get calls mainly from elderly consumers who say, you know what, I just wired $5,000 and the IRS is saying, you know, it wasn't them. What do I do? Unfortunately, many times you're out of luck. There's the One Ring scam. Are you familiar with that?
No, but a little bit. We were talking about it earlier. So tell people about the One Ring scam, because this is pretty scary.
Well, not to be confused with what I've characterized as the yes scam.
So we have two we're going to talk about.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the first one.
Okay, the One Ring scam is come about in the last year or so. But what they'll do is there's a group operating out in the Caribbean, and they will call your cell phone. They'll allow it to ring once, and then they'll hang up. If you're like most people, you miss a call, and you don't recognize the number, you want to know who's calling you, you call them back. What they'll do is they'll keep you on the line. The longer they bring up a huge bill. And recently, this past year, my cell phone rang. It was my work cell. It was a missed call. I didn't recognize the number. I called them back. It just didn't seem
It's
right.
a reverse charge?
Yeah, yeah.
And it goes to them?
It ends up coming out of your account. In other words, you're billed through your Verizon or your carrier.
No, that's a cell phone as well, or is
Cell
it?
phone, yeah.
That's
Yeah,
amazing.
Yeah, and I don't know how. I don't know what the intricacies of the scam is, but it's called the One Ring scam, and we get dozens of calls on this daily. In fact, I wasn't aware of it until I talked to one of my lawyers, and he said, "Oh, that's the One Ring scam." You know, I contacted my carrier, and they credited. You know, they took care of it up front. So you should be aware of that. The other one is the yes.
Well, let's talk about the One Ring scam.
Sure.
So I think a good rule of thumb for people is if you get a call and you don't know the number and they don't leave a voice message, don't call them back.
Exactly.
Because if people really want to get in touch with you, they will leave a voice message, and I don't think these people will.
No, because
they want
that's the whole point.
Rule of thumb: if it's a phone number you don't recognize, don't call it back.
Absolutely. But again, what we were talking about before is the spoofing. Now, I don't know.
Now, I've been spoofed where it looks like it's coming from a family or a friend, and you
Yep.
pick it up, and it's actually a telemarketer.
Exactly. And we haven't heard, but it's probably just a matter of time, these One Ring scammers were going to start to spoof you. They'll call, let it ring once. It's your mother or your father, a friend of yours, you see the number, you call back. But again, to your point, if it's important, they're going to leave a voicemail.
Mm-hmm.
So it's unfortunate the world we live in. You know, someone asked me the other day, you know, how can I best protect my identity? And I said, go back to the dark ages. You use cash. Don't use a computer. But that's unrealistic.
I would love to do that, actually.
Right, right. But unfortunately, you know.
Not the world we live in.
Right. In fact, there was a business in Boston that refused to take cash.
Wow.
They said, no, we only take credit cards, you know, so, but that's unrealistic.
Now, talking about, you know, phones and people calling, how is there a do not call list, and can you get on it? Because
Sure. Our office maintains it along with the
so
federal
how
government.
does someone register their phone to get on the do not call list? Because I'm doing that right after we take
Well,
the
they
show.
can contact that, but be aware, George, if you're committing fraud, a criminal act, they're not going to adhere to a do not call list. You know, someone says, well, I'm on a do not call list, I'm still getting calls from these scammers. Well, they're committing a crime. So if they're involved in a criminal enterprise, they're not going to adhere to a government prohibition.
So
against
really,
well,
it can help.
what it will do is legitimate telemarketers. They adhere to it. So
And where can people find to get on information to
you
get
can
on the do not?
contact our office, and I'll give the number at the end of the show. We have a local number and a toll-free number, and they can direct you through the process.
All right, we'll put all that information on the screen.
Sure.
Now we're going to talk about the yes scam. We have like 5 minutes left because
Sure.
it's gone by quick. Tell us about the yes scam.
The yes scam, and again, I'm characterizing it, but the way it works, and you mentioned it, or a colleague of you mentioned it. I was at a cable show yesterday, and the chief of police mentioned it. I was at a show in Central Mass 2 weeks ago, and they mentioned it. And our co-ops have come across calls involving this yes scam. What they'll do is they'll contact you and say, "Hi, George, it's oh, I'm sorry, I dropped my headphone. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?"
Yes, yes,
Right.
yes.
And they record that.
They just recorded your voice.
And then the next thing you know, you're getting a product shipped to your house. Yeah, you gave us the consent. You know, so it's you're living in a world where you got to watch how you respond in terms of verbal responses, as well as returning phone calls, as well as answering calls. But again, you just got to be aware that there are scammers out there, and they're looking to take your money. And again, as soon as we find a way to identify them and make folks aware of it, they come up with another type of scam. The other scam that's been out there for years is the fake lottery scam, which I'm sure you've heard of it. You know, you've been awarded $500,000, and all you need to do is pay the taxes on it. Now, you would think that no one would go with that. The Boston Globe had an article a year ago in which they highlighted numerous consumers who had, in fact, been victim to the scam. One guy actually got 3 notifications that he had won $250,000, $300,000, $500,000, and then the fourth notification was from a group that said, "We understand that you've been awarded 3 prizes. Under federal law, you can't claim it unless you join our association." He ended up spending over $100,000, and he got nothing out of it.
So much great information on the special edition of Talk of the Town about scams and frauds and how you can protect yourself. Remember, folks, when in doubt, check it out. Greg, thank you so much for talking to us today. And if people want more information, if they have any questions about everything that we covered and more, where can they find that?
Sure. Again, I talked about the various agencies that we oversee. The Division of Banks, which regulates credit unions and banks in Massachusetts, they have a consumer protection line. Division of Insurance has a consumer protection line. So if you have issues with your health care or property insurance, you can contact them, or you can contact our office. We have a toll-free number, which is 1-888-283-3757. Our local number is 617-973-8787. Or you can go online. We have a wealth of information on our website. It's www.mass.gov/consumer. And again, contact our toll-free number, 4 co-ops who do a phenomenal job of providing information to consumers in Massachusetts.
Well, Greg, thank you so much for talking to us. You really are a champion for the community and just helping people protect themselves. And, you know, we appreciate you stopping by the ActonTV studios.
Well, I appreciate you having me, George.
Anytime. This is George Cox for ActonTV. We'll see you again next time.